we're gonna do a lore reading stream. Um, and something wonky is going on with my OBS, but hopefully the audio works in this scene and not the other one. Um, so what I'm planning on doing is we're gonna look at the Ishtar lore second. What I'm actually gonna do first is boot Destiny. Um, and read the two lore books that are in Destiny right now for Kepler. I haven't figured out how to get the entries for the third lore book yet, but so I'm not going to be reading that one in this stream, but once I figure that out, I'll probably do another lore stream where I include it. Yeah, Skynet is trying to take me down. They don't want you to know about the Edge of Fate's lore. So now I just need to log in and get to my collections tab, and then I can finally read some lore. Only, what, like, almost 20 minutes after starting the stream? I'll cut that out of the VOD. Okay. So, the first lore book that we've got is... I think both of them are in the darkness. There's not... Oh, not the darkness. Dusk and Dawn. And there's no new light ones. These are just the Guardian rank ones. This is the lore book as without that I haven't figured out how to get any of the entries of yet. I'm guessing it's not available unless it's something that I just haven't gotten to yet. But when I find out how to actually do that, I'll do a stream where I read this lore book. But we have the Tenets of AION, which I believe I just got from the campaign. Orbits definitely was from the campaign, and I think so was Tenets of AION. But we'll start with Tenets of AION. Yeah, I know. I also really wish that they would tell us how to get lore books, because that would, like, make it so much easier to figure out if there's, like, a place I can go to get this, if it's just not available yet, what the deal is. I'm guessing this isn't the raid lore book, because usually the raid lore books are a bit longer. And it usually would be encrypted, but who knows? Okay, so I'm going to start with Tenets of Observation. We, descendants of Aeon, hold thusly, that it is our duty to observe the universe in its great glory, that it is the sacred requirement placed upon us to perceive as truly as possible, with all our senses, that which surrounds us, and specifically this place, Kepler, that by this observation, which we carry on unceasing, we come to a place of understanding, that in true perception lies the seed of comprehension of anything and everything, that we are called to observe before any other goal, for no hypothesis nor study can be formed without that observation, that we understand that we are human, and so it is our eternal temptation to assume, to guess, to fill in the unseen with that which is familiar or easy to us, that we must at all costs resist this in the service of truth, that it is our mission, our duty, and our deepest cause to observe the nature of the universe as closely to truth as we are capable, that it is acceptable in our great cause to create tools for the purpose of perceiving and recording any phenomena which our human senses are unable to grasp on their own. That as these tools are created by we who are human, we must repeatedly interrogate their clarity and accuracy. That we will rely on the tradition of peer review to maintain this. That we will ever seek to expand the ranks of those peers to lay claim to us bias and falsehood. and that we are always and forever students, never masters. In the service of observation, this do we promise. Every year we begin anew. We mark these years by the circuit of earth around Sol in honor of our origin. On the first day, we return our attention to that which we know, and come to it with fresh eyes. Behold the sky, the microscope, the human bacterium. Behold it again, as though an infant. What have we assumed? What may not be true? What do we find again, thoroughly and with rejoicing, is after all true? This we are commanded. Observe clearly and joyfully, and learn from it all. Glorious are the stars, and beautiful is the telescope. Praise to all that which we may observe, all that which we may record, for us and for our descendants' descendants. Remember how first we recorded our anomaly, and give thanks. So this seems to be like their philosophy behind the fact that they are a they're like a culture of scientists, because they were founded by scientists who arrived to Kepler, I think, before the end of the Golden Age, as they kind of said in the campaign. And so this is just some kind of like science stuff where they're like just talking about how observation is really important to them, which is like true for any scientist. So that's kind of interesting. It seemed to me, based on the campaign, that they are like a culture that is almost bordering on like scientism, which is like this idea that you put almost like a religious devotion to science, and it like they want to observe everything, which scientism is not necessarily a good thing, to mix religion and science, and like faith and science. So I'm kind of interested where this lore book goes from. I'm guessing it's just going to be a lot of like philosophy and mission statement-y type stuff based on this. And they just really want to like observe everything and get all the data like their ancestors would have, who left Earth to visit Kepler and like probably on a scientific mission. And based on the ARG, AION is like an organization dedicated to studying time anomalies, so they probably went to investigate 9 related time anomalies on Kepler. Okay, so the next entry is Notes on Observation. So we had Tenets of Observation, which is like philosophy, Notes on Observation. For as long as humans have existed, we have observed the stars. In the times before history was written, stories of them were passed down from voice to voice, generation after generation. In the days of writing was told the curve of the earth, the position of the sun. Sailors have ever charted their way by the stars. Our predecessors of AION did so in their turn. First they looked to the stars, and they saw that the stars were brilliant, that in their light was written the movement of planets and suns 1,000,000 years distant. They saw the planets of Sol more closely, and the stellar bodies surrounding Sol, and learned what they could see, and what they could see only by the shadows that were cast. Second, they looked to those cast shadows, to movements of gravity, pushes and pulls that were true and untrue. And lastly, they saw that there was something unexplained. They called it the Kepler object, for the father of astronomy, and it was impossible by all other laws, but the data was what the data was, and so it was let to be. Rather than manipulate data, the predecessors of AION sought explanation. They knew what should be, and that the Kepler object was not. But where lesser scientists would have claimed it was error, the predecessors of AION believed the truth of their instruments and of their senses, and instead asked, why? And thus it was that when the predecessors of AION, passing this mystery along their lines, finally gained the capacity to see the stars for themselves, here is where we ventured, to Kepler, to observe for ourselves and to understand. What is it that breaks the laws no human has written? How is the fabric bent here and only here? What is the truth? We will find it, said those of AION, and so we did. So we came to Kepler and we heard the whisper of the anomaly. Here and now we live in the radiance of our anomaly because those who came before us looked, saw clearly, and sought answers. As they lived, so must we, seeking always to observe what is truly present. Oh, thanks for stopping by, Alyssa. So this lore entry, it seems to be about their discovery of Kepler, which was kind of hinted at in the AION terminal from the chess ARG. And this is how they come to Kepler, which is that they noticed an anomaly that defied the laws of physics, and they were like, okay, let's go see what's going on there. And this whole bit on like error is kind of interesting because it's like it's almost kind of like raising up the scientists of AION compared to everyone else, because they're like, oh, we knew that it wasn't an error even though it didn't match what our theories said, which like sometimes is true, but sometimes is also not true in science and astronomy, where like you see an error and something doesn't make sense. That can either be like, in the case of like Kepler, what's happening is some kind of like undiscovered phenomena that they need to observe more and figure out like what the science behind it actually is. But sometimes it is just an error. And as a scientist, you can't really know until you measure it a bunch of times and like have a bunch of independent observations and are confirming that you're not just having some kind of systemic error with your measurement. So that's kind of interesting. There were some hints in the AION chess ARG that like Kepler is like planet 9 for the planet 9 hypothesis, and like it is influencing the gravitational resonances of the Kuiper Belt objects. So I'm interested to see if they expand upon that in this lore book, because they're kind of referencing this idea and this like concept of the 9 like bending the laws of physics and changing things that we saw in the campaign. So hopefully there's more on that. So now we had tenets of observation, notes on observation, tenets of hypothesis. So this is going to be like their philosophy of like hypotheses. So I'm guessing each one is going to be like a tenet, then a note, a tenet, then a note. So tenets of hypothesis. We descendants of AION hold thusly, that to experiment sensibly and fruitfully, we must have a hypothesis, that experiment without purpose does not teach us, and wastes valuable research material. That proving or disproving hypotheses in the way of the ancient tradition is the most valuable method by which to apply our efforts. That testing the same hypothesis numerous times to confirm the results are sound does have value. That experimenting with the same hypothesis through different methods confers as much knowledge as repeating the same experiment twice. That iteration is the key to learning. that we must try to prove hypotheses affirmatively rather than to prove negatives. That is the lesson that the lesson of absence, while valuable, requires too much of us in this time and at this place to bring us true learning. That it is impossible to fully and without question prove something does not exist. That we must begin with a question and formulate the hypothesis as an answer. That acting thusly confirms that the hypothesis has relevance to the moment, and thus may further our sacred mission to understand the universe around us. That we base a hypothesis upon facts that we have observed about this universe, rather than suppositions or assumptions. That a hypothesis is a reasonable prediction that we may gain knowledge from, rather than something unreasonable and easily disproven, which gifts us with no new learning. That to formulate a poor hypothesis can lead to the formation of a poor experiment. That we are bound by sacred duty to treat each hypothesis as though the universe itself rests on it. That we must have honesty with each other and ourselves about the utility and soundness of any given hypothesis. That we must proceed forward in learning at all costs, any arrogance sacrificed on the altar of peer review. And that we will fail, and by that failure, learn. In the service of hypothesis, this we do promise. Every year we begin anew. In the season that was once spring, we revisit experiments we have conducted before, hypotheses already tested, ours or our ancestors, those passed down to us as inheritors. We set aside our existing processes to celebrate previous experiments, and we transform our current studies with new hypotheses based on those facts we once acted on. In this way, we do not let old studies lie idle, for much may be learned by examining old facts in new lights. This we are commanded. Reason practically, theorize testably, and learn from each experience. Blessed is every disproved hypothesis, and beautiful the broken glass of failure. Sing praise to every micron's increment of progress, for it all has a great worth, every scrap. In the mistake is written the anomaly's call, and in the proof our answer. So their theory seems to be like they're constructing hypotheses in the ancient tradition, which is like the modern scientific method, I think. And they're testing their hypotheses multiple times to confirm results, which is like how science works. And they value testing with different methods as much as repeating the same experiment twice, which is pretty true. You want to... Ideally, you do both, because, like, you want to know that your one measurement with that instrument isn't a fluke, but you also want to test with another apparatus to, like, make sure that you're not having some kind of, like, systemic measurement error with the apparatus for the previous experiment, which is why usually, like, in order for something to become, like, scientifically accepted, you need to have, like, multiple different groups test and confirm the results of it. So I think that's kind of what they're talking about here. And they're trying to prove things affirmatively. This is like a philosophy of science thing. It's impossible to fully, without question, prove something does not exist. Like, you kind of can, but you also kind of can't. You can kind of, like, rule out things you observe, but also, like, you're limited by your observations and can't really, like, fully ever know for sure that something you're not observing is real. I think this might be why the gun last Thursday exists. I'm guessing that'll have a lore entry later, but like the last Thursday theory is that the universe was created last Thursday and all of our like memory and scientific data was like simulated prior to the start of the universe to make it seem like the universe is older than it actually is. So this is kind of similar to that, where like it's hard to prove a negative. It's much easier to prove things that are like affirmatively true. And then they're also doing like basing their hypotheses upon facts. That's like just good science. Poor hypothesis can lead to poor experiment. That's also good science, because like it's like a fundamental bias that you want to be careful when constructing an experiment to not like have it be leading towards one conclusion. And you're like biased towards like, oh, is this hypothesis true, can like lead you to overlook errors or things that don't match the hypothesis. So you got to be very careful about how you're constructing the hypothesis for your experiment. So that's just like good science. I like this idea of like promising to revisit their old experiments and verify that they're true. It's almost like it's almost like they're having like existential issues and they're like, oh, we need to make sure that our knowledge is true, so we're gonna go retest it. The only problem with this idea is that it takes a lot of like human power to be constantly rerunning the same old hypotheses, which is why like experiments don't get replicated as often as they should be. So like if they're like a small society of scientists, like how are they going to have the time to replicate all of their big experiments in every domain of science? That's just like wild that they're trying to do. But I think it's kind of cool that they're like basing their whole society around like testing, hypothesis, observation. So now I'm kind of interested to see what their notes on hypothesis is. Like, I'm hoping it'll like tell us something about their hypothesis on why Kepler is the way it is. So, notes on hypothesis. The scientist Idris wished to observe the growth of microbes. He cultivated them in different ways, but as they grew, he found that in his eagerness, he had made no prediction about what he had expected to happen. He had data, but no fruitfulness. The microbes responded to dark matter, but where was his control group? They thrived in morning and night alike, but to what point, that knowledge? And so the scientist Idris was forced to begin again. None of the microbes could be used for further testing, so he returned to the source, with sterile equipment and clear labels as demanded by our customs. On this second experiment, the scientist Idris said, I believe that the microbes will multiply aggressively in the presence of dark matter. And while it contained knowledge gained from his earlier, fruitless experiment, he was able to test this hypothesis cleanly. He isolated a sample colony from dark matter and cultivated further microbes with the presence of dark matter. But when his dean asked him, what is the factor of multiplication? And how little dark matter is required to enact a colony to grow most optimally? The scientist Idris could not answer, for he had forgotten to include specifics in his hypothesis. And so the scientist Idris was forced to begin again. He set aside the colonies he had worked with and returned to the source, with sterile equipment and clear labels. This time before he began new work, he stopped to consider truly what he most wanted to know, and what he could most closely predict based on his existing data. On this third experiment, the scientist Idris said, Microbes exposed to a small concentration of dark matter show enhanced multiplicative capabilities over those exposed to none at all. And he further elaborated his hypothesis with specific numbers, beginning at a very small concentration and cultivating microbe colonies with larger and larger ratios. And when he was asked for the results of his learning, Idris presented data regarding how the descendants of Aion could most efficiently cultivate the microbes. And his dean said, "You have done well and brought new data to us by the thoroughness of your work. And our children and our children's children will know these laws as Idris's. Our microbes will sing to the anomaly. Let it be so." And so it was. So this is kind of like a cautionary tale on constructing a hypothesis. I feel like they're being a bit intense with this idea that, like, there is no fruitfulness in this first experiment, because it's still like a learning thing. Like, an experiment without a control isn't very helpful, but you still got that initial data. So all you really need to do is just run it once with the control again, which is what they do. And then he comes up with a more, like, coherent hypothesis. And then I think this experiment is, like, fully legit at this point. Like, it could write a paper, just a more limited paper on the microbes. And then the dean is kind of, like, pushing Idris to be like, hold on, let's get some more detail here. How are they multiplying? And so then he, like, reworks his experiment, and he, like, makes it very succinct and clear. So it's kind of like, this is kind of framed as like, oh, poor Idris had to run the experiment 3 times. But I think this is, like, actually a good, almost, like, is parable the right word? Or, like, maybe like a cautionary tale, but it's not even really very cautionary, because it's not bad. It's more like, this is how you kind of build up to a good experiment, and you can't really know how to construct a strong experiment that's gonna, like, give you optimal results until you've tried a few times. Which I think also goes back to this idea of, like, testing your hypothesis over and over to make sure that it's true. So the Aeonians seem to be very anal about the details, and constantly wanting to, like, be like, are you sure your hypothesis is right? Can your hypothesis be more specific? So that's kind of interesting. Maybe a little bit harsh to Idris, but solid scientific principles. Okay, so now we're going to have tenets and notes on testing and analysis. So, oh, I'm kind of noticing that these are the sections of a scientific paper. So you'll have, like, the observation section, which is the data that you collected. You'll have, like, the hypothesis, which usually comes first and is, like, what you're trying to test. And now testing and analysis, which is kind of like, okay, how did we collect the data, and how are we going to analyze the data to show a specific result, either confirming or rejecting our hypothesis. So, okay, I'm going to read this now, but I'm going to take a drink of water first. Sorry if that sounded kind of weird. I don't know how well you can hear my water bottle through my mic. Okay, tenets of testing and analysis. We descendants of AION hold thusly, that it is not enough to observe and theorize, that practical application and experimentation is required to truly understand the universe around us, that therefore we are bound by duty and sacred mission to construct experiments that test our hypotheses in the living world around us, with as little harm and as much gain as possible. that failure of any experiment is not disaster, that in that failure we are bound to learn. Whether it is better methodology, failure points to the... Oh, wait. I'm going to start that sentence over. That failure of any experiment is not disaster, that in failure we are bound to learn. Whether it is better methodology, failure points of the experiment, or something else entirely. And further, that failure of an experiment is distinct from failure to prove a hypothesis, which is also known to provide valuable information. That disproving a hypothesis or failing to prove one informs us by the absence or presence of something new, which is worth learning from and observing. That to maximize our chances of gaining new and valued information, experiments of narrow scope and incremental design hold great value to us. That such experiments may be easily handled logistically and the results built upon rapidly. But that experiments broad in scope also bring us great value. So long as the scientist is willing to spend the time and effort in deep thoroughness, such that no part of the experiment is wasted. That achievement of results alone is not enough. That the data which comes forth from any experiment must be thoroughly analyzed for meaning. That only once analysis is complete can the data be applied back to the hypothesis to learn from the intersection of the two. That the results of an experiment are sought for a purpose, and not only for the joy of learning that such data exists. That we are called to measure results against hypothesis and thus complete the cycle, not simply generate endless data. And that although there is joy in the simplicity of learning something new, more joy and meaning is to be had in the completion of the method cycle, in shaping that learning into purpose and building upon our understanding of the universe. In the service of experimentation, this do we promise. Every year we begin anew. In the season that was once summer, we return to old hypotheses, cast off as impossible to shape, and examine them once more. We ask, what would be required to test this? Can the hypothesis become something that may be proven or disproven? For this is when we repurpose the cast off and the failed, and strive to find our way forward to something new that may yet bring understanding. This we are commanded. Test everything, prove or disprove the theories, and learn from it all. Glorious is failure. Sing the praises of knowing untruth, and for in its shadow can we see truth even so. Rejoice in every experiment, no matter how small, and know that our work and our striving makes us too holy. So this is kind of talking about like this is about the difference between like an experiment that rejects the hypothesis and an experiment that doesn't provide anything of value, because like an experiment is not a failure if you're failing to affirm the hypothesis, because you can learn something new if the hypothesis isn't true, and it might simply need more experiment to figure out what is true, but it is a useful result. And they're leaning into their like insane experiment and re-experiment thing, because they're like, every year we're gonna look at all of the old hypotheses and try to make them into real hypotheses. And so this is kind of like talking about like the idea that there are certain hypotheses that are like unprovable and like can't be like disproven, which makes it like not a real hypothesis, like science-wise. And so they're trying to like reshape these hypotheses and like make it so you can find a way to prove them, which this is also kind of valuable too, because sometimes in like different fields there's like pie in the sky ideas where it's like, oh, this would be an interesting thing to test. Like for example, like the simulation hypothesis is like a very popular idea in like pop culture because it's this idea of like, what if we were living in the Matrix in a simulation? Um, but the problem with that is it's really hard to disprove because like any way that you like go to disprove it, like say for example, you're able to exit the simulation and observe the simulation being run in the outer layer of reality, like that would prove that our reality is a simulation. But at that point, you don't know, like, is that layer that you're in real? Or is that another nested simulation in another layer of reality? So it's kind of really difficult to prove or disprove because you can either have like nested hypotheses, or not nested hypotheses, nested simulations, or you could also say like, well, what if going outside to observe the simulation was part of the simulation tricking you into believing that it's a simulation and that wasn't real. And the problem with that hypothesis is like it's really hard to like pay attention to any data whatsoever because there's always like a way it can be folded into, well, this is just a greater part of the simulation. It's very much like the allegory of the cave, and like, how do we know that we're not observing shadows on the wall and we're observing reality? So Aeon wants their hypotheses to be grounded and provable, which is very good for a science cult. Like, you want your science cult to be at least producing good scientific results and not just like weird cult shit. And it's also good that they're like, failure is a way to learn, because that's very science too. So hopefully now we're going to have notes on testing and analysis. Notes on testing and analysis. This story, we are told by those who came before, brought with us from the long ago. The shape of it may have changed, but the spirit is true. This is how we came to see our anomaly. There was a scientist whose astrophysical experiment failed. She crafted it carefully and thoroughly, and there was no fault in her hypothesis. But even so, the hypothesis could neither be proven nor disproven. The numbers were correct in how they were obtained, and when her peer checked and rechecked her work, the math was correct. But it was wrong, too, by an order of magnitude. The data retrieved was nowhere near what it should have been. Because the nature of the failure had no visible logic, the scientist was perplexed. She repeated her experiment with new tools, new equipment, her input sanitized, her method scrutinized and repeated when no fault was found. Once again, the experiment failed to produce expected results. The gathered data far beyond the bounds of prediction, although now the failure was of a known sort, foreseen as an outlying possibility. And so the scientist began to perceive a pattern, and when a third experiment produced the same sort of failure, she knew that she had found something. She sensed that this was the movement of something greater. Thus the scientist listened. She set down that first question which her first experiments had been aimed at, and she took up this new cause, to identify that failure with purpose. First she learned its parameters, finding where those outlying datasets were easiest to record. Then she learned how not to fail, avoiding those parameters. And within the space she framed by those failures and avoidances, she learned a new truth about this universe. Something reached back to her, visible only through the data. Something... Oh. That was the previous slide. Something reached back to her, visible only through the data, through the analysis of mistakes and the visualization of math, and through dark matter, are dearly revered, which gives weight to the world around it in ways that should not be and yet must be. This is how we first learned the anomaly might speak, by listening to the virtues of failure. This is how, eventually, we came to our blessed anomaly and began study of the million-year project that it is. Imagine if she had not looked. Imagine if she saw only the failure of instruments or assumed that she herself had been wrong. Imagine if she was not rigorous enough in her studies to try and try again. So it is our duty to learn from every failure, essay every test thrice, and more, and be open to new possibilities. To remain blinkered on one outcome, one cause, is to be cut off the road to the future. These signs are blessed of the anomaly, datasets that cannot be, and mathematics so gloriously misplaced that they cannot be simple error. By their ways in gravity shall we know them, and by the distortion and the broken law shall we find them, by their grace. So this is about the anomaly. It's about having a failed experiment, not able to prove your hypothesis, and then you check and recheck the work, you do another follow-up experiment, and then being perplexed. And that seems to be the origin story of the Aeonians. They had this scientist who discovered the anomaly, confirmed in multiple ways that it's anomalous, and then came to understand that this anomaly is real and it's not just a mistake in the experiment. And then she's found the movement of something greater. I'm not sure how you make the jump from this experiment isn't true to movement of something greater. I guess this could be a theory that oh, we found new physics or new science, but this seems like a little bit of a logical leap to me personally. But this seems to be the anomaly, the nine. They listen to the virtues of failure to learn that the anomaly can speak, and then go to Kepler and meet the anomaly, and then eventually come to talk to the nine. I don't remember a lot in the campaign about how the Ionians feel about the nine, because they worship the anomaly, and the anomaly is based on the nine, and seems to be a result of 3 and the stuff that they're doing down in the singularity. But I'm kind of what do the Aeonians think about the nine? Do they worship them as gods? It seems like they would worship them as gods, but that also has some implications. I'm kind of curious. I want more direct stuff about the Aeonians talking to the nine, or what they've heard from their holy anomaly, and what new physics and math that they discovered from the anomaly being completely broken. Because one thing that makes the anomaly an anomaly is that they kind of talked about this in the beginning of the campaign, where they're talking about how there's a black hole at the center of Kepler, and if that black hole starts growing, it'll consume the Sol system, which could be true, but also you have to wonder how big is the black hole, what's its mass, because if it's like a stellar mass black hole, the solar system's already fucked to begin with. If it's a planetary mass black hole, Sol is fine. The orbits won't be destabilized. Like, hopefully it's existed for a long time. But, like, Kepler shouldn't be stable around a singularity at its core. Like the matter should start, like, decaying and having orbits that, like, decline until it, like, consumes the planetoid. Because otherwise they need to be moving really fast around this black hole. Um, but I think that's, like, the nature of the anomaly. Like, the physics doesn't make any sense of this planetoid. I'm seeing that chat is looking for Subway Surfers. I'm sorry, I don't have any Subway Surfers gameplay for you. I've got Destiny Orbit music though, but no Subway Surfers. Also, hi Eco. Okay. So we've done our notes and tenets of testing and analysis. So we've got tenets of iteration. We descendants of AION hold thusly that to try again is the most noble and vital of endeavors. That one result, one experiment has never been enough to prove or disprove anything. That even when we are satisfied, we will and must try once more, simply to be sure. That in assaying the same experiment over many times, though we believe we already know what the results will be, we receive confirmation and with it peace and grounding. That in those times where we are shown that we are wrong, we still gain wisdom of the shape of the world. That when experiments which have been coursed 99 times fail on the 100th, we are bound to consider that this may not be an outlier, but a new truth or some new change of the universe shown to us in glory. That to strive to avoid failure will ever teach us nothing. That for the willingness to chance wrongness and failure, we are gifted with the clearest certainties of all, that which comes from having found them by our own endeavors. That any failure may also be reproduced, and should be reproduced, to ensure that this too is understood, may be identified and given name, and that we do not fumble in the dark with only success as a goal. That on occasion accidents happen which cannot be reproduced by our own efforts. That to learn which those are is as noble a cause, and so we repeat them. That such accidents always have some other cause which we may come to learn of. That we will recognize the difference between learning to understand a failure and questing into dead ends, which we know will disappoint us. That it is nonetheless good to understand the nature of those dead ends, and return once we have come to peace with them. That solutions are shaped by increments. They left in a typo. It's one of those typos that your brain will omit because it's the same word twice. That solutions are shaped by increments. Oh, I guess this isn't technically a typo. It just looks weird. That we will not always see that good and fruitful answer. This sentence is really throwing me right now. That solutions are shaped by increments. That we will not always see that good and fruitful final answer. That a circle may be made by 100 straight lines, and we must draw every single one to see that circle, for we have no concept of its existence with only the first. In the service of iteration, this do we promise. Every year we begin anew. As the day and the night balance in equal measure, at the beginning of the season that was once autumn, we revise those experiments we have been reluctant to change. We will pick them up and take the next step forward to understanding, by success or failure, the truth of the heart of the universe. This we are commanded. Move forward always and find solace in repetition, even as we find learning in change. Glory to the iteration and blessings on the thankless work. Here do we thank you. Holy are those who persist through challenges and find the way to truth. So this is about like iterating experiments to continuously retest results, which is they kind of already talked about this. But iteration is like building on the same experiment over and over. Where like this one is like about iteration. Idris iterating on the experiment until Idris gets it right. So this is kind of similar. And this is talking about like a mistake in the measurement that they can't reproduce, which does happen sometimes. Difference between learning to understand failure and questioning dead ends, which is also like scientific method stuff. Like if your hypothesis is a dead end, like it's not a failure. If your experiment fails, like you can learn from that failure to make a better experiment in the future. And like even if something seems like a dead end, like science or theory wise, it might become relevant later, which has happened several times in the history of like different scientific fields. My background's in physics, so I think of like different physics theories that like were thought to be wrong and then brought up later again. So now we're going to have notes on iteration. From the commencement of the 51st class of neophytes, given by the most holy Dean Rebecca in the 60th once autumn since the establishment of Kepler's microbe colonies. What does it tell us if we have one failure in a group of 3? Is that statistically significant? Says Arya, of course it is statistically significant. A 33.3% failure rate is far too large to ignore. And says David, of course it is by no way statistically significant. There is a clear majority even at this small scale, and to ignore that is folly. Both are wrong, of course. The true answer is that we have no way to tell. At 3 trials, one failure could be either. We cannot begin to see true statistical significance until the dataset has expanded, until we know that one failure is truly 33.3%, or if it is only 1 among 100, and we found that single lapse early. And even then I would caution you, do not write off that single failure. You know, of course, of penicillin. One culture contaminated with mold. 1. A single outlier out of so many that we do not bother to count them. And from that, the greatest miracle of medicine until the Ares 1 team returned from Mars. There is our paradox. One single data point is never enough. That contaminated culture was repeated again and again until certainty was achieved. 3 data points is never enough. Even if all are in agreement, 3 cannot encompass the full breadth of experience. And yet, 1 data point, among 1,000 others, can still be enough to say to us, there is something here. And so I say to you all, there is something here. Listen for the call and face it boldly when you hear it, for you will know the truth of that which you study. Someday, perhaps, that call will be from our beloved anomaly itself, and to that call I urge you, look and listen and answer. So this is talking about the idea that um like statistical significance, like 3 is a terribly small sample size. You need more information than just 3. Um and then this is talking about like failures and how like a failed experiment or like a contaminated culture or data set can lead to like a revolution in science with penicillin. I'm not super familiar with the story of penicillin, but like I know that's a thing that happens. And then they're also referencing Ares 1, the arrival of the traveler, humanity making contact with the traveler. And so they're like philosophically like, okay, we don't want to ignore failures that happen. We want to make sure that we don't have another penicillin on our hands where a failed or contaminated data set actually has a really interesting and useful results for science and for the progression of the field. So this is a great philosophy. I really like it. Oh, I also wanted to look up neophyte. One thing that I like to do when I'm reading and I don't know the definition of a word I come across is I always look up the definition just so that I know like what they're talking about. Okay, so it's a person who's new to a subject, skill, or belief. They're like a novice. This is like if Scientologists weren't in a pyramid scheme. I don't think Scientology has anything to do with science. They've got some like wild beliefs about like alien gods and shit. Okay, so the last entry is a conclusion. Um so this seems to be like wrapping up the lore book. And they're like tenets of observation, hypothesis, testing and analysis, and iteration. Hey, Enran. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the origins of Scientology, but I do know L. Ron Hubbard was up to some shit. Don't sue me, Scientology. Um, that was not considered a negative statement against your founder. Um, um, okay. So I'm gonna read a conclusion now. We descendants of Aion hold thusly, that there is never a time when we have learned all we can, for the wonders of the universe are boundless, and even we many cannot hold all of it. That nevertheless there may come moments in the process where we conclude chapters of our research and pause before we move on to a future experiment. That to rest in this time is good and proper. That neither scientist nor machine may operate at full speed, strength, and sanctity for the complete duration of their lifetime. That rest begets better experiments. That it is kind and virtuous of us to thank any living participants in our experiments, with words or deeds as appropriate. That the unliving participants are also owed thanks, in our recordings of the experiment, or in our consideration of the world in which we live. That all of our results we will take with us as we move into the future. That no experiment is done only to be forgotten. That our future is built on every experiment we have ever done and every experiment attempted by those who came before us, back onto the day a human learned the correct method to reproduce fire. That if the understandings we achieve now become something else in the future, or if something we prove to satisfaction now is later disproven, it does not mean our work now was for nothing. That rather we understand that such disproof could not exist without our work of now to measure it against, and so we look to the past with reverence rather than bitterness or disdain. That we are not alone, that we are never alone, that in our deep history we are but one branch, that we are one branch from a great and infinite tree, that we prepare for those who will look back to honor us just as we honor those whose theses we build upon now. In the service of conclusion, this we do promise. Every year we begin anew. In the season that was once winter, we lay down our successes and frustrations alike. We stop and we rest. We clasp our hands together and learn from that which our fellows and forebears have studied. For all of this is done for us. Your sibling learns so they may share that knowledge with you. And in this quiet time of the year, we honor that generosity and return it threefold. Thus we are commanded, learn always and never lose sight of past nor future. Glorious is the open mind and joyful is the one who learns. To those who have come before, sing praise, and to those who will come after, bless them with our work. We strive in the radiance of our anomaly always. So this is like the conclusion of both a lore book, but also it's like a double entendre for the conclusion section of an experiment. Like the conclusions you're drawing from the experiment and whether or not you've confirmed or rejected your hypothesis and like ideas for future study. So that whoever wrote this is kind of clever. And that it also is like setting up this idea of this like season by season. They do their observations. At the beginning of their year, they observe. In the spring, it's like they're celebrating observation at the beginning of the year. They're coming up with hypotheses in spring. They do testing and analysis in summer. They iterate in fall. And then they conclude and reflect in winter. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting physics stuff in this expansion. I definitely agree. This lore book is definitely written as a holy book too. It's like a religious text, but it's also a scientific text, which is kind of interesting because they've got that like culture of making science into religion because they're founded by scientists. And this idea, where was it? Like, this is like the acknowledgement section of a scientific paper, like acknowledging everyone who helped you, where you got your equipment, where you got your data. And this is about like standing on the shoulders of giants and the idea that all science continues to build upon previous science. And they're doing some like poetic Prometheus allegory stuff here. People love comparing shit to Prometheus and the discovery of fire. Like, I think, well, there was a lore entry last year that did the same thing. It was one of the winnowers. I think it was the one where they're talking. Like what was that ship called? It's not the First Knife ship, it's I guess the detail isn't super important. But like talking about the thing that separates humanity from everyone else is the gift of fire. And this is like experiments gave us the gift of fire. And they're like grounding modern experiences and experiments in this like human prehistory. And this part is about like constantly testing the past and disproving previous theories, not like invalidating that evidence. Um this is like a big deal in physics. Um because and physics is my the main area that I'm familiar with. I don't know as much about the other areas of science, but in physics there's this constant like iteration over history of like different models of the universe mathematically. So like you start out with like Greek scientists who were like coming up with these basic laws for describing motion, and then eventually you get to Newton, which is what most of physics is founded upon, and you start like getting mechanics and motion, and then scientists after Newton build upon Newton and expand that to other areas of physics. You get like Maxwell doing electricity and magnetism. And then this is what I'm describing is called classical physics, because they came up with this whole model of the universe that worked really, really well in most situations, but they discovered a few situations where it didn't work. And that doesn't mean that they have to throw out the whole model. It just means that those models are like they're incomplete. They're a less fine scale. And then after classical physics usually comes Einstein and quantum mechanics. Einstein came up with special and general relativity and basically proved that the Newtonian theory of gravity is like an approximation of this deeper and more complicated theory that can better explain how gravity works. And so it's kind of like folding that old data that is technically wrong, but it's still useful in most situations because the scales are fine and you only really need general relativity at like really high speeds and large scales. And it comes on, iterates, builds upon it, honors Newton without like throwing out Newton's work. And then quantum mechanics does something similar for electricity and magnetism and like finds deeper, more accurate versions of particle physics than the Maxwell equations. And you get like eventually you get the standard model from quantum mechanics, but it's like an iterative process where you're taking these like widely accepted theories and you're finding the areas where they break down, and then you're using that area where it's broken down to like build a better theory that works. And like that's where a lot of the most like important and interesting questions in any scientific field are. Like, we've got this knowledge that we have and we've tested and we've proven it works in most scenarios, but it doesn't work in this one scenario, or there's like a conflict in our data. And so you got to find a way to honor that and build upon that previous knowledge to create a more accurate theory or a more specific theory. Okay, so I think I've covered everything on Tenets of AION to start with. So I'm gonna look at epochs, which wait, I also realized there are 9 entries in the Tenets of AION. That's suspicious. I expected 9 entries for this lore book because it's about the 9. Like, I could see the little text when I got each of the triumphs associated with the lore, that each one is a member of the Nine. But why are the Aeonians writing 9 entries? The number 9 makes me feel like a conspiracy theorist in Destiny. Okay, so I'm gonna read Epochs and Orbits. What's the deal with the formatting of this? Did someone leave like a tab in that they didn't notice? We've got 9 symbols. Each member of the 9. Oh, is there anything interesting on here? I think these are the symbols for the locations of each of the different areas on Kepler. I'm going to double check that really quick. Yeah, because this is the Gorge symbol. That's Exile's Accord, Central Academy, Outer Steps. Yeah, so it's each of the 4 areas on Kepler. And then I don't really know what this is. It just looks like some blue Kepler area stuff. But this has like the classic 9 symbols that we see. And then it's also got the new like identity symbols. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. This is Sol. I know this is Neptune. I don't know which ones of these are which. Because they get a little bit more complicated. This one might be 4? I don't know. That's not a super important detail, but interesting artwork. So I'm going to start by reading the Sun. I'm assuming all of these are going to have like the standardized writing styles for the 9 that we kind of like confirmed before the expansion with the Bungie tweets and the Rite of the 9 cutscenes. And this seems to have like, they gotta distinguish their formatting from 1, so they've kind of like written themselves into needing like slashes like an anamorphosis or like quotation marks, or this time they're using square brackets. They did live next to the 9 for many years, so it seems very subtle. There's not like overt 9 stuff in Tenets of AION, but it could be 9 related. So I'm gonna start reading. This is Sun or 9. I'm surprised they didn't call it Sol. Because one thing about Destiny is they love saying the inhabitants of Sol, and like they almost never use the word the sun. It's always the Sol system and not the solar system. But they've decided to call 9 the Sun here. Your consciousness hangs suspended in solar wind and swept into timeless unknown space, touched by the breath of the cosmos. 9. Of course, consider this card calling. Introduction is a later scene, a message, but for now, a word. An endless ivory plane extends. The truth of time is laid bare here in opposition to you. Cause and effect are predeterminate law. What has happened will occur. What occurs has happened. What will happen has occurred. You challenge the hierarchy with a paracausal question, but it is squelched by a higher fourth-dimensional order. The time for that question is layers and folds beyond this one. Unknown space curls away. Relax, my good abiogenesis. There is no danger. Take this glimpse of clarity. Your ideas of 9 are quaint. We can educate. There is heavy, inescapable gravity, weight, responsibility, authority, flare, control, swirling matter and particulate once, and again a blazing star, power enough to hold back endless nothing. Fusion churns heat and light from the eternal vacuum with Fusion churns heat and light from eternal vacuum with familiar atomic magic. A white-hot phosphorus, like snapping a fingertip match. We are a part of you, as much as you of us, predating your wrinkled gardener. Caught in the middle with you, an interconnected system that shares one fear, one dream. The moment burns bright, but ahead in the long bend from non-existence into being, into nebula, into compression, lies hydrogen, helium, oxygen, carbon dead, fossilized consumption. Anywhere along the infinite folding splays of perspective, birth, life, death, curved outward and back in long elliptical recursion. Gravity coaxing collapse, dark energy coaxing dispersion. Matter and thought suspended between. Freedom and death, ability to choose, one's orbit, one's ties, one's fate. 9 see the grave on level plane beside our birth experienced eternally. Breeding fear. Caught in an entropic whirl, a race to the bottom where the winner starves. Amoebas to arthropods to apes, run out the clock, scratch out the options, get real desperate, commit the acts promised not to, because their synapses have cut furrows. Then they die. Many extinctions blot the gentle bend, the anxiety, the shockwaves of their scars felt through all layers. Always. Inescapable. Life burns out. Even me. But not you. That old illuminated abiogenesis, so bright and sharp in you. You have felt this, and you are a weapon to defy fate. We've been eager. A non-dimensional being sinks into the fabric and wrinkles the ripples of fate. For attracted orbits to cross, I get the game. Life flourishes across soul as you descend through epochs, as if stepping off your intended line, reaching into the seams, unfolding relativistic fabric, the edges curling back into an eternal recurrent knot from which they first receded. Complexity, fractalization, we're both life-givers, baby. The future deep in, the past draped over and around you. Together we can circumvent established ends. I forge new from old all the time. You sink through space-time until a red giant engulfs the inner planets. You are cold. You won't find the answers you want yet, darling. It is not time. The first time around. Your boundaries no violation. We can't all just snap our fingers and transcend our design. Talk soon. You stand on Kepler alone again. So this seems to be like a vision that the sun gives the Guardian um, on Kepler, and like these square bracket sections are like things that are happening in your vision, where the rest of the text is nine speaking because it's in nine's formatting. Also, I see what the writers are doing here. They've surrounded the word life by two vertical lines, which that's the way that the gardener talks. That's their like syntax compared to the nine syntax, and the gardener being the traveler. And I said the gardener because the sun is um, referring to the traveler as the gardener, and this is like the sun is kind of like talking about the like non-linear way that the nine view time. So they start with like the nebula that created the solar system. Um and how like the chemical elements are like compressed. A bunch of gas forms stars and planets. And then it's going all the way down to presumably the end of the solar system, where the sun becomes a red giant and then burns out and becomes a white dwarf. Um, that's what the "You Are Cold" is talking about, because you've gotten really, really hot as the sun expands and expands and expands, because it's like exhausting all of its fuel, and then it burns out and shrinks. So this is kind of like playing with the life cycle of the sun and the life cycle of the nine, and talking about how like the nine aren't yet ready to fully reveal themselves, but like they're introducing themselves to us. Um and they're kind of like rejecting paracausality here. So I don't know exactly what that means, but they're like, we're not paracausal. Don't ask a paracausal question. The fourth dimension is higher than paracausality. And they're also saying that like we've got quaint ideas of the nine, so we clearly don't fully understand them yet. And this is also talking a lot about the connection between the nine and the life and soul, which is based on the fact that they're made of dark matter that like permeates the entire soul system. So like they literally are inside all of the humans of soul, because like dark matter can pass through without interacting. Um and they're older than the gardener, which I think that's also referencing an idea that was set up in one of the Warmind lore entries for one of the exotics, I believe. Might not have been Warmind, but one of the exotics is like talking about how the nine are space magic that's older than the traveler. I don't remember which one off the top of my head. And it's also talking about like cause and effect and how the nine are like manipulating time. Yeah, I think it's Antaeus Wards. I can double check really quick. Yep, it's Antaeus Wards. Okay, I'm gonna go to. Oh, we're going to Jupiter. We're not going to 1. Interesting. Jupiter 5. Your consciousness whips through rolling. Your consciousness whips through roiling turbulence, curved like a bowed limb around a terrifying well of gravitational hunger. You cascade across the rim of a great eye. It gazes through slicing ammonia rime and blinding gaseous convection to sight you, other. Writhing thought flesh, steeping in confusion. You are flung from the Jovian atmosphere to bear the mind-shattering expanse of Jupiter against a sea of ink, dominant, twisting bands of desert-hued storm to fill your vision. They fill your thoughts. They fill the cavities of your form and churn within the elemental foundations of your bones. Cosmic kin in neighboring dust. The planet beams its majesty and terror upon you. Attention. I am 5. Averter of cataclysms. Sol Panopticon. Annihilator masses of ice and minerals. Cut iridescent tails into the inky black before their paths are diverted under the persistent tug of mass. They plunge down, overtaken and pacified by the storms of Jupiter. Across overlapping eons, great change sweeps over the inner planets of Sol like a progressive gradient. There is a dichotomy of warmth and solitude, both in orbit and position. Future pallbearer. If I remain. I almost thought that said I fireman or I firemain for a second. If I remain, the unignited nuclear air, Sol will perish in. Wait, so it's. I always find 5's text kind of hard to read because of the spaces. So it's saying, future pallbearer, if I remain, the united nuclear air, Sol will perish in maddening immortal. Oh, okay. Let's do take like 3 or 4. Future pallbearer, if I remain, the unignited nuclear air, Sol will perish in maddening immortal atrophy. We got it right that time. Buried within the deepest folds of space, a lonely sphere of dying kinesis drifts in lightless pitch, its atmosphere long irradiated away. A drifting, rotting sarcophagus. You see its arc bend endlessly, unchanging into an unseen distance yet to be determined. You are dragged, chained by its gravity, pulled by wills beyond your own. The universe dies before you know sanity again. And now the madness is in some distant fold. Like a denied memory. An experience encapsulated elsewhere apart from now. Our future clings to a corrected deterministic prediction. Servile minds amassing. To be engulfed by my galactic nucleic arc horizon. To usurp conduction, to pacify a choir of sating vassals. So it's servile minds amassing, to be engulfed by my galactic nucleic arc horizon. To usurp conduction, to pacify a choir of sating vassals. The dead world shudders and splits. The surface dives to the core in a surge of gluttonous autosarcophagi. What once failed to be a star condenses itself, feeds upon great streams of matter from a vast collective of mind-bent supplicants, until light cannot escape its singularity. Faded armament already swung, your moments are exchanged like currency by those who would wield you. You are drawn in over the Lagrange point. The atmospheric Carmen lip kisses your tumbling form over the brink like a drop breaking surface tension. You plummet as friction catches you with flame. When they fade, only I will remain. Heed not the gravity of fate. You fall to your feet on the surface of Kepler. So this is like, there's a lot of astronomy in this. It's kind of playing with the idea of Jupiter as like the king of the planets, the god of gods in like Greco-Roman mythology. And it's talking about like being crushed by gravity and the rim of a great eye, which is the great red spot on Jupiter, I think. Because it kind of looks like an eye, but it's like a gigantic storm that's like hundreds of times the size of Earth. So it's like showing us how impressive Jupiter is. It's talking about like how big Jupiter is again. Oh, this is referencing like the idea that Jupiter like stabilizes the gravity and the orbits of the solar system, because it's like the second most massive thing in the solar system aside from the sun. It has kind of like this property where it draws comets towards itself. And if those comets had like come into the inner solar system and collided with Earth, it could have created like an extinction level impact for life on Earth. So like it's talking about how Jupiter protects Earth from those comets. Unignited nuclear air is talking to this idea that like Jupiter is a failed star because it's one of the it's pretty high in mass, and it's one of the most massive planets before it would collapse into a star. But Jupiter is not like that massive. It's very massive, but like you don't start getting to actual like failed stars, which are called like brown dwarfs, until you get to like I think it's like 13 masses of Jupiter. So it's close, but it's not like it's not an actual failed star. It could have been if it got more mass, but this is talking about determinism and free will. And it's making a prediction. I don't know what it means by servile minds. Servile minds? I'm just going to double check the definition of servile. It's having or showing an excessive willingness to serve or please others. Oh, so it's like amassing worshippers. So I guess the Ionians could be called servile because they worship the anomaly, which is technically three. Um, and it's using itself to pacify its vassals, so its followers. Oh, I was gonna look up autosarcophagi because I don't know what that means. Self cannibalism. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that on YouTube. Uh, um. So it's talking about, wait, where? So it's like the core is like consuming Jupiter, I guess. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's kind of poetic, I guess. Um, it's like condensing at the core. And this is talking about the nine like making deals about the future, I think. And it's calling us the fated armament, which is just like fated weapon, which is the title of like the title you can earn on Kepler and is like a main idea in the expansion. And this is about like streaming. It's feeding on matter until it forms a black hole, which is light cannot escape its singularity. So it's almost like taking the power of its supplicants to create a black hole. That's kind of interesting. It's very like dark god-esque. And so this is like the core creating a black hole. You're drawn over the Lagrange point. So this is Jupiter kind of saying like it's greater than the rest of the nine because it's, or no, they might be its worshippers. They could either be those who would wield you. Those who would wield you, and then it's saying they. So it's probably talking about the rest of the nine and saying that it will remain after the rest of the nine are gone, which is kind of interesting. Um like it could ensure that if it turns Jupiter into a black hole. Wouldn't be great for the solar system if 5 did that though. But this one is very dense. Oh, you're talking about direct collapse black holes, Aaron? Yeah, this would be a direct collapse black hole because it's like not ever having the period in its life where it exists as a star. It's too, like, it just goes directly to a black hole. So Five's whole deal is that they're like, I'm big, I'm Jupiter, I'm the king of the planets, but it kind of forgets it's smaller than the sun. Um, going from Jupiter to Mercury next is interesting, but I'm going to read Mercury. Your consciousness reels in tidal hemispheric lock, splitting your thoughts into polar extremes. A radioactive siren song beckons you. You stand in the corridors of time. I am the first one of 9, only a speck against a magnitude, but given form in the contrast. Short missive in mind, quantum infinities twist in the solar wind, but retained always since the forest. Here there is a future uncovered, waiting in pressed digital vinyl. Trapped in 3-body problem, between where soul meets the deep and timeless simulation. A moment in orbit, always here and never to return. You stand in the corridors of time. Countless pathways are before you. You will find your path because you have found your path. Through many iterations and great effort, it will draw us back. You stand in the corridors of time. Countless pathways are before you. One choice, another, no matter. There is a choice, a return, and an attempt made again. Each in vain, each without progress or purchase. Mercury shifts between shade and light. We offer a chance, a subversion not taken until now. In this place that always was. To execute it, we must execute. To execute it, we must place the out-of-place pieces. You stand in the corridors of time. Countless pathways are before you. One choice, another, no matter. There is a choice, a return, and an attempt made again. Each in vain, each without progress or We motion along the groove of the subversion guiding. You are placed, and now you must execute. Do you not see? It is the only way. The voice heard as if the thought was your own. Your perspective locks on what previously remained unseen but is now the only path before you. Your probability is primed. Your fingers entombed in alien soul. Or your fingers entombed in alien soil. When exhumed, grip a towel of pale make. Sorry, I just had to drink some water because I'm losing my voice a little bit. Um, they are really going with the repetition here. You stand in the corridors of time. So this is talking about the corridors of time on Mercury. Tidal hemispheric lock. Mercury has a tidal lock. With the sun. Like Mercury rotates slower than it orbits the sun, which is kind of very strange. I guess it's not that strange, it's just physics, but it's on Earth that seems strange. So it's playing with the fact that the corridors of time are on Mercury, and one is like showing us these different pathways and probabilities that it's then converging towards one fate that's destined by the 9. And it's kind of talking about the idea that, like, you do not have free will. You must obey your fate and become the fated weapon. What becoming the fated weapon actually means, we don't know yet, but that's presumably going to be a big part of the Fate Saga, like what that whole deal is. So I don't have a ton more to say about this. Oh, it's also talking about how Mercury is the smallest planet, but it's the first planet. And because the numbering gives Sun 9, Mercury gets to be first, but really the Sun is first. Kind of interesting choice there, but it makes sense. So we're going Jupiter to Mercury to Uranus. Uranus 7. You are nothing, less than nothing. Nothing is known, and you are not yet known. Long awaited, long to wait. I am coin duality. I am 7. Consciousness bathes in azure tinged electricity hitting filament. Distant warm whispers lick crystalline methane frost away from a celestial corpse of unborn promise. All known existence is pinned thoughts, drowning alone. A shiver runs along your cortex as soul illuminates from 8 other points, like cerebral flares howling fresh existence into an empty sky, heralding the self-replicating rock and membrane amalgam that once and forever would sustain their captured orbits. 9 reject linear prison, normal distribution, to live in extremity. We beg fertile systems, brimming with domestication, to our end. You see the chain of unbroken symbiosis, linkages tugging between cosmic spatial tesseracts, tucked amid past and future presence, and planetary shackles anchored to the bedrock of reality. We see, you see, out ahead, a diversion from fate. We exhaust ourselves waiting to give a small push. You hold the chain in perpetuity. You hold nothing but shattered remnants. You trust because you are trusted, a mirror of a mirror. You trust because you feel strong as we made you. You feel the familiarity of death. You have felt it many times. This time there is no malice, just indifferent intent. 2 truths to know about the inners. Very polite. They do not mean it. You shiver. So, this is about 7. This one's kind of confusing. It's the 9 reject a linear prison, a normal distribution. So it's talking about how in the future there's a diversion from fate. And the 9 are exhausting themselves trying to like push the Guardian towards fate, I think. Trust. It's talking about our trust. It's trusting. So I think this is about like how we've trusted the idea that we've had free will in the past because of the whole idea of like guardians make their own fate with paracausal forces, but it's kind of flipping that on its head and saying like, well, what if making your own fate was part of your fate, which is what Alison Lurs said in the reveal stream. and like we're trusting of the nine and trusting of our fate because we're strong. The nine made us strong. Which, did the nine really make us strong? I guess they're manipulating events to get to this timeline, but like, I feel like that was the Traveler. I feel like the nine shouldn't gain responsibility for that unless they're somehow gonna reveal that the nine caused the Traveler to come to Seoul, which like that would be something. It would certainly be something. And then it's saying that the inners are very polite and that they don't mean their politeness. They're not actually polite. So kind of trying to get us to distrust the inners. So now we've got Venus. Oh, I see what they're doing. They're doing, it's alternating. So this is an inner perspective. This is an outer perspective. This is an inner perspective. This is an outer perspective. This is an inner perspective. And it's just going back. Wait, asteroid belt? Who let the asteroid belt into here? We'll get there when we get there, but I was not expecting that. And there's no entry from 3. Uh-oh. 3 is dead. Venus 2. Your consciousness chokes in sweltering pressure. Sulfuric wash corrodes divots into your gray matter. The overflow runs psychedelic canyons down your skull, opening your mind. Greetings from 2, with tidings of undisclosed motivation, of your gardener who did not flee to Seoul. It arrived to meet us in future flourishing. I called that shit. I called that right before they did it. Dang. The nine are claiming responsibility for the Traveler. That's wild. Contrast bleeds in streaks and wilting fuzz around your vision. Specters of terraforming linger like visual artifacts in your periphery. An inverted dimension of programming hums beneath your feet. A pyramid and cloud occupy overlaid space but differing time. Meteors turn the boiling surface to basalt, cooled into glass, as stillness takes the dying world. Its last gasp of atmosphere exhales away. The gardener once dreamed here that there was another proliferation. A pale badge of gleaming luminosity affixed to your chest. Locked outcomes, we consider, but present problem distracts from future questions. Many systems in motion, too numerous all be, empty. The question remains, in the wrinkled fabric, why Seoul? The color fades from sight. 2 does not see. Other seeds along the bend calls. Unanswered. There isn't an answer in you. Are we alone? We do not know. So this is all about like the Traveler coming to Seoul because of the 9, and it's kind of raising that possibility in question without explaining it. Like the 9 called the Traveler to Seoul, but we don't know exactly why. Like, what was their purpose in calling the traveler to Seoul? Was it to protect themselves from the witness? It seems like they would have talked about that in the division if that was true. So they seem to have some other like gambit or game or purpose for calling the nine to Seoul. And yes, the nine are the purpose in our roar that the traveler heard, it seems. Could be something else. But this is a big deal. Like very, very big deal that will no doubt have implications for the Fate Saga. Hopefully they give us more. A pyramid and cloud. So this is talking about like the nature of Venus and how it's like really acidic. Its atmosphere has a ton of like sulfur in it. It's also very, very thick, like extremely thick. Um, that this phrase like a pyramid and cloud is catching me because it makes me think of the witness, but I'm not sure if that's what they're talking about. Because it's very because like two is talking about the dark about the gardener. Um this is like terraforming, then an inverted dimension of programming, a pyramid and cloud, overlaid space but differing time. Meteors turn the boiling surface to basalt cooled into glass. So this is like death. Possibly death brought by the pyramid fleet and the witness. So this might be like terraforming only to have the collapse occur. I wish this was a cutscene. Like, this sounds like it would be a good cutscene if it was one. Um, I wonder if this like Are We Alone is talking about like this is something I've been wondering with the focus on the nine again, like if there are equivalents of the nine in other star systems. Um, like I'll have to rewatch the Lodi cutscene when I play the campaign on my other characters because I did not catch that implication at all. Um, but I'll have to like watch for that now. But I think this is talking about like if the nine exists in other star systems, like are there versions of the nine out there like for each planet in each star system and each star? Or are the nine unique to Soul for some reason? Like they're the only ones who are conscious. And that's something I've always wondered about since learning about what the nine are. And why Soul? That's the $1 million question. That's big mystery that needs to be answered. Neptune 8. Consciousness is drawn out across great isolating wastes, expanses of solitary silence, broken only by sentient heartbeats, so distant from the bleak cold. Introduction 8. Introduction equals 8. Stillness without equals discovery within. It is empty. Out in the distance, 8 dull glints of life defy the expansive vacuity. You rest in a gulf of tranquility between solar passes. They leave no mark, as the skipped stone makes no impression until it contacts water again. Restrictions equal innovation. A long period passes like waves between breaths. You sit staring into an oceanic abyss, a horizon, a skyline pocked in nebulaic cloud, processing the long arc of time. Many things pass and pay no heed. War rages in cosmic paracausal wrinkles, like thunder from cracks of lightning in the sky. Wrapped in watchful dark matter, bands trailing celestial hosts. Thought reigned into the isolation with meteoric impression. Clashing forces equal precious metals and fostered sentience. 9 shadows veiled equal 9 orbits cast away. You feel the surge of feverish connectivity sparkling reactive embers into ignition. You stand before the veil on Neptune. Maya Sundaresh reaches for it. The conductor, for it. The veil, some amorphic form, for a distortion in the fabric of the possible. Split by choice, assured in action. 9 minds focus, echoing. Light wrinkles and your eyes fail. Your altered reality equals freedom achieved. Your joints stiff. Your mouth dry. The gardener equals an unending sapient nourishment. We equal one cycle. You return corporeal on Kepler. Sound fades in and out as a warning flashes on your visor. Vitals critical. So this is about, like, 9 introducing themselves. And it's I think the 8 dull glints of life are like life on the 8 planets of Sol, or it's either talking about that or it's talking about like the 8 planets being alive. And it's like the planets are like glints of life between the stars, between like the sun and other stars. War. It seems like Neptune is kind of indifferent to the events in Sol. All of these wars that have happened in the Destiny games and the history of Sol are just kind of like paracausal wrinkles, like thunder in Neptune's sky. It's like an indifferent god watching. Thought reigned into the isolation with meteoric impression. I think this is talking about the veil arriving to Neptune after the collapse. Because, like, the veil would be thought, and then this is talking about the veil. The war would be the collapse. And the clashing forces causes Neomuna to be founded by the Exodus Indigo hiding there with the veil, and it fosters sentience, which means there's like a group of sentient life that's living on the planet as a result. And then this is exploring the veil, Maya Sundaresh, which, like, Maya would presumably be connected to Neptune or 8 as a result of living on Neomuna and the veil, like, making her into the conductor. So that's kind of an interesting connection. I don't really understand what, like, this is talking about the life, the life being given by the traveler through its light, but I don't know what we are one cycle means. Like is it saying that the 9 are one cycle of reality? Is it saying that like there's like a cycle of interaction between the sentient life and the 9, as the 9 give the sentient life survival by manipulating events, and then the sentient life give the 9 survival by like causing the ripples in dark matter that form the 9? But then also Neptune almost kills the Guardian, it seems, to make a point. So maybe it's saying that like we would not be alive without the 9. I think that's probably what it's trying to say, or something vaguely related to that. This is a really interesting lore book so far. There's been a lot of stuff in here. like I could spin up theories about pretty much every entry so far. Mars 4. Consciousness expresses omnidirectionally through the layers of existence that settle like undisturbed dust. Each expression ever present in time with each other, distinct together as fingers on a hand. 9, since crust mantled core and time bloomed like primordial spores across existence. When thought first summited a world and screamed into the abyss, our formation answered. The 4th intellect invites a bridge between the perspectives. Know that we are. Your hand extends space before you rots away, turns to heat and gas and fuel for another. In another step, the bone reconstructs and gives rise to gnarled strands of entwining muscle, gloved in flesh, reaching. Know that we are alive before the creeping wrinkle of paracausality tugged on the fabric of our system. We stitch split seams with dampening quantum threads. Opposing orders unopposed. We do not cross your wrinkled orbit, bounties cherished. And for it we experience the glory of life held close, for a time too brief. Your hand brushes rubbery leaves in a fertile grove. The growth reaches skyward toward a wrinkled mass in the clouds. Cities flourish on the horizon. Life, cradled lovingly, briefly. All existence of merit wraps around this perihelion of my happiness. My cradled love buried in rust. Your hand is desiccated entombment. Centuries bake the thin atmosphere in iron oxide desolation. The wind wails for you as a moon drifts overhead in shattered suffering. It does not have to be so for all. Dissonance threatens a possible peace, a possible freedom, and coveted life. None want death, those least who feel it always. In pattern, the fourth intellect tends the grave of our stillborn sister, tends to the sheathed weapon with war and oil, tends to the orphaned ark of an emissary. Your hand reaches out to shake Lodi's. There is an implicit trust present. There is a weighty countenance behind his smile. Where colder streams of consciousness load the ties that bind, 4 meets 3 and reveal. In the grief of loss, I care not for rules. So I am going to look up reveal, because I do not know how to say that word or what it means. Reveille. Oh, so it's like reveling. Or no, it just sounds like that. A signal sounded especially on a bugle or drum to wake personnel in the armed forces. Ugh, that sounds gross. So this is talking about like Mars very briefly having life after the traveler terraforms it, and then that life going away after the collapse. And because Mars's atmosphere is really thin, it's really hard for it to support life for an extended period. And it's also talking about how the 9 were alive before the traveler arrived and paracausality came to the system. And Mars seems to be mourning the death of the life that lived on it and its rust. And this is talking about the orphaned ark of an emissary, which is like probably Orin leaving and no longer being the emissary. And then, of course, it's calling us to Lodi to think of him as the future for the being the emissary of the 9. So it seems like colder streams of consciousness are the outer members of the 9 who loathe the ties that bind them. And 4 meets 3 and is like reflecting on 3's death. With like a military bugle thing, which is apparently what a reveille is. So this is all about loss and the potential loss of Lodi's free will to serve the 9, in addition to the loss of Mars's life, and like the implication from Orin that 3's death will bring extinction if humanity doesn't intervene and the Guardian doesn't intervene. Saturn 6. Consciousness flows between glistening rings and an ascendant mirror that reflects captured notion as caricatured nature. You are drawn into an ascendant well, ravenously gulping negative pressure into a supranormal maw, more gluttonous than a mass point-driven dive. Welcome, gray meat. I am 6, who spans the birth and fall of corporeal deities aplenty. The rings of Saturn pass beneath you. The planet looms large ahead. You sit in the cockpit of an awoken interceptor as the dreadnought's aversion wave crashes over the fleet, taking the queen. You watch as 6 light bearers stand triumphant, your body eroding away into non-existence. The weight of my prison is known to no other bound in the shadow of mass, even the fiery pomp of self-import. My freedom is due. The dreadnought wriggles and riggers, as worm, as Akka, as petrified life. It is not so different a prison than an unliving planet, a throne, a world, alive in the agonizing stillness of once distant death. You must rip it out. I am nourished by the oldest of sapient wills. My bounds contain the extent of their secrets. Saturn reflected in ascension drinks from taken wills and dreaded offerings. I harbor no fear for you, for in the end, fate is made by the strong, and you are only flesh. A great blade is extended before you, surrounded by many broken others. No weapon can kill what is woven into the fabric of existence. No shackle can halt my divergence to an ascendant orbit. I have learned from that which gives rise to itself. You hold the blade. The traveler hangs without orbit, raised motion against the system. You feel the fervor of a mind raised by the sword. When you are told to kneel, remember who stands above you, for we have known many things that kill you. You crash to reality and death. This one is interesting too, because this is seeming to imply that Saturn is the, what's it called? The Lord of Every Nothing. Is this saying that Saturn is the Lord of Every Nothing? Because it would make sense with how the Lord of Every Nothing is described in the lore surrounding Sunder Doctrine, where it's talking about whispers from Saturn's rings, which I originally interpreted as whispers aboard the dreadnought, but it could literally be Saturn, and it could literally be Six, who is the Lord of Every Nothing. I don't know if this is enough to directly confirm it, but I don't know, that seems pretty clearly implying that Six is the Lord of Every Nothing, but it's not confirmed. But that's interesting. Is it Six? I know a lot of people were theorizing that Mercury is the Lord of Every Nothing. But could be Saturn. Because the dreadnought is on Saturn and has been in Saturn's rings for a long time. So the final entry is asteroid belts. 0. Consciousness drifts in ever uninhabited space, a belt of disparate stone marking the divide. There was a point in the distant farther when 9 could have become 10. Now a stillborn heartbeat, awaiting life unanswered. Drift in an eternal cairn that mourns what could have been in silence. So this is describing the asteroid belt as a failed planet that didn't coalesce into like a planetesimal and then a planet during the solar system's formation. Um, and I think that's what 4 was talking about in its entry. It says something about a stillborn. Mourning a stillborn sister. Yeah, tending the grave of our stillborn sister. So is the stillborn sister the asteroid belt? Could be. Could definitely be. Because this is like stillborn heartbeat. But we also this also kind of contradicts the idea in Anamorphosis that Thea was consciousness at a point, because there were 10 at one point, but Thea was destroyed by crashing into Earth and forming the Earth Moon system. So they're being poetic. But that's an interesting implication. A it's like marking the divide between the two factions, the inners and the outers. And this whole lore book is about like an exchange of perspectives between the inners and the outers. And also, it is not lost on me that with 3 being dead, there now is an even number of inner and outer members of the 9, and so they can't have a majority that overrules the other side. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. There's a lot of interesting astronomy related to the 9, especially in this lore book. I'm gonna go claim the triumphs. Oh, they're not real triumphs. So what to do next? So there's also a lot of lore on Ishtar. I'm gonna go use the bathroom really quick before I do anything else, so I will be back in a few moments. Okay, I'm back. Um, I think I'm gonna end the stream here. I was originally planning to also read all of this lore on Ishtar, but I'm starting to lose my voice, so I don't want to overtax it. So I'll probably do another stream to read all of the rest of this lore. Probably maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow. I don't know exactly, because then Saturday is the raid. I don't know, we'll see. But I do plan to do another stream reading all of this lore too. I just my I'm losing my voice, so I'm gonna end it here. But thank you everyone for watching. This was kind of a new experimental format, so I guess let me know in the comments of the VOD what you thought of it if you listened to it after the fact. But appreciate everyone who tuned in and listened and theorized. Have a good night, everyone.